If you ask me what is the best hybrid camera available right now, I would say this, the Sony A7IV, at least in my opinion. The A7IV is one of the best hybrid mirrorless cameras Sony has ever made. It has been my go-to for all of my photos, videos, and content, and it's a solid camera. However, Sony has released some newer cameras in that time, so is the A7IV still worth it in 2024? I bought the A7IV a little over a year and a half ago, and it was actually the camera that made me switch from my Canon EOS R that I was shooting on before. Over time, I decided that I wanted to switch over to the Sony ecosystem, and that was for a few reasons, but one of the main ones being lens options. You just have so much more lens options from third-party manufacturers like Sigma when it comes to the Sony E-mount. That was the important thing for me, but I specifically landed on the A7IV because it was the perfect hybrid camera. Now, most cameras can be considered hybrid cameras. However, there's always a spectrum, and I found that a lot of cameras, even though are considered hybrid, are not right in the middle of that spectrum, giving you an even amount of photo and video features. The A7IV just had the right balance of both features for both photo and video, and I found fell right in the middle of that spectrum. Now, when I made the switch to Sony, there were some Canon cameras that weren't out yet. Cameras like the R5 were out, and definitely the better hybrid camera over the A7IV, and that's mostly because the R5 was also way more expensive than the A7IV, so they're not really the best to compare. The one that most of you are probably looking at, if you are looking at getting a good hybrid camera in the same price range as the A7IV, is probably the Canon R6 Mark II. And this is a great camera, but you are going to get a higher resolution image out of the A7IV because the R6 is 24 megapixels and the A7IV is 33 megapixels. You're also going to get better video specs and quality, more custom buttons and dials, as well as other things like a full-size HDMI, a dual-base native ISO for those video shooters who are shooting in those lower light situations, and a lot more with the A7IV. Now, if you're trying to stay in the Sony ecosystem, you've probably been looking at the A7C II that just came out a couple months ago, which is a great choice if you want the A7IV just in a smaller body, and that's because that's basically exactly what it is, an A7IV in a smaller body, just lacking the dual card slots, the full-size HDMI, and you do get a slightly worse resolution in the viewfinder. When it comes to photos, the A7IV has Sony's incredible autofocusing system, which is extremely important because the majority of the time you're going to be relying on your autofocusing system. Now, to be fair, almost all cameras that have come out in the past few years all have great autofocusing, so that's not really something to worry about. It does have that 33 megapixel full frame sensor capable of producing a 7K image, giving you a lot of cropping room and a lot more detail in your photos. It can shoot in its 14-bit uncompressed RAW, JPEG, or in its 10-bit HEIF format, or RAW and JPEG at the same time. It can shoot at a maximum of 10 frames per second using both the mechanical and electronic shutter, and has a pretty insane buffer depth when compared to other cameras on the market. It has great dynamic range at 15 stops, and the photos that come out of this sensor are just so clean even in low light situations. On the video side, you can shoot up to 4K 60 frames per second, 422 10-bit H.265 if you want. The 4K is downsampled from its 7K 33 megapixel sensor, so it's extremely sharp, but perfect if you want to take any horizontal video like this and crop it vertical for socials. You're still going to get the sharpness and detail of a 4K image. It has no recording limit, which is nice if you make videos like this or you find that you record for long periods of time. You don't have to worry about that 29-minute limit that most cameras tend to have. It can shoot in S-Log3, S-Cinetone, and HLG. When shooting in S-Log3, you have a dual-base native ISO of 800 and 3200. And this is nice if you find that you're shooting in lower light situations and you want to get the cleanest possible image. It also has focus breathing compensation and 5.5 stops of in-body image stabilization. Now, like I said, I've been using the A7 IV exclusively for all my photo and video projects, even my content, all the way up until, last month when I bought the FX30. And the A7 IV is great for all the things that I mentioned. It doesn't miss a beat when focusing, it's quick, I've yet to run into any overheating issues, and it's just a super reliable camera that I feel confident that wherever I bring it, I'm going to be able to take the photo or video that I need when I need it. Some of the things that I really like about the A7 IV are all the custom buttons and dials on this camera. You can quite literally map any setting to these buttons to be able to access them quicker. So with the dials, you can actually have 3 different setting configurations when in photo mode, and the same thing for in video mode. They work completely independently and separately. That being said, not every camera is perfect, and depending on what you need in the camera, the A7 IV might not be for you. The first issue is the rolling shutter. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The rolling shutter on this camera isn't the best. It's there, and it is definitely noticeable if you're capturing any high-speed movements or you whip your camera side to side. You're definitely going to notice it. For me personally, this never really bothered me because I don't do any fast action movements where I would need a camera that can control that rolling shutter better. The second being that it has a 1.5 times crop factor when shooting in 4K 60. If you're shooting in 4K 24 or 4K 30, you're fine. You'll get the full sensor readout, but when shooting in 4K 60, it will crop in 1.5 times. And lastly, this camera does have overheating issues depending on where you live, the climate, and your use case. I've personally never dealt with any overheating issues, and I've filmed at 4K 24 for a couple hours non-stop, and never once did it overheat on me. However, I do want to mention it in this video because there are people that do deal with overheating issues with this camera. I'm not disregarding the fact that it doesn't overheat just because of my personal experience. I recently posted a short talking about the overheating issues on this camera, and there were a lot of you that have experienced overheating issues, mostly those of you who are living in those warmer countries. So with all that, is it worth it? Should you buy it in 2024? If I didn't already own this camera, I would buy it right now because it serves everything I would need in a camera. If you're like me and you don't care for 4K 120 and shooting in those higher frame rates, you don't care about the rolling shutter because you're not going to be whipping your camera side to side, and you just want a really good camera for both photo and video with great autofocusing and features, the A7 IV is a great option still in 2024. I also think because you can get this camera at a pretty good price right now and used and on sale, it's even more worth it for what you're getting out of a camera. I think if you're a professional photographer who also dabbles in content creation or video, the A7 IV is still a great option in 2024. If you're someone who does a little bit more video, then maybe skip the A7 IV because you are going to get that crop in 4K 60 and you're not going to get any 4K 120 if that's something that you need in a camera. If you have a little bit more money to spend, cameras like the A7R5 and Canon R5 are going to be an even better option. It just depends on your budget. If you're a casual photographer or someone who is doing this as a hobby, I don't even think you need the A7 IV, and something like the A7V might be more than enough. So let me know what camera you're still rocking down below in the comments. If you want to see more videos on the A7 IV, I actually made a few that you can check out on the channel. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more photography content. And with that being said, I'll see you in the next one.